What's up?
Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
I
So,
need that right now.
oh, so we've been doing all kinds of media today. So I thought it would be fitting if we finish this evening with a podcast. You've got some cool stuff coming up this week that you're going to embark on. So I thought everybody would be interested in hearing about that and kind of what goes into it. But we did photo shoot, a bunch of stuff for the shop. We do a ton on social media. So we had professional photographer come out. Jenna did a great job with that. It was really awesome. Did you have fun doing that, or have you ever been part of a professional photo shoot previously?
Not to that level. I mean, there's been bits and pieces like, hey, can you jump in for a second? And do just some kit fits and the sidewalk in front of a shop. But that's pretty much the extent of it. I mean, that was the smoothest that it could have possibly gone. I think I was expecting a little bit more chaos, a little bit more, just more involved with that. But that was easy. That was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah, Wilder does a really good job. We've been working with him. It's probably like his fourth or fifth shoot with us. We try to do one every about 6 months or so. We'll typically get some fresh shots of the shop. Normally, a lot of times we'll have customers in. This time it was just all lifestyle stuff. So we were out on the trail, putting on different box kits and stuff like that. You put on a super dope box, like white and black kit, so slick looking. That's available here in the shop. People can go on our store and order any of the box stuff. We'll send it to you. No big deal there. But yeah, it was super fun. So anyhow, back to what you got going on this week. This past weekend, you went back to Indiana, or basically Indiana, into Kentucky. You live van life. You have what year's your van? What are some stats on it that we should know about?
So I have the classic 1985 Chevrolet G20. It's
a G20.
A series of kind of fits the creeper van stereotype a little bit. Very rough paint on it, being an 85, but I did find a diamond in the rough when I bought it, and I've been living in it for almost 3 years at this point. And it really is my baby. I've packed my whole life into that thing, and so I'll get a lot of arguments on whether or not I should continue that thing, keeping that on the road. But it really is just kind of my heart and soul to live that van life with that particular van. Like, I just don't want to give up on that one.
So you decided to do this about 3 years ago, maybe like 6 or 7 months before COVID started. You must have had some sort of weird feeling in your blood that was like, I need to get away from people. I need my own like locked in space. But so you kind of got a head start on a lot of folks kind of, I think, jumped into it. I know right at the beginning of COVID, when the shop was shut down, it gave me time to build out our box van. So I insulated it and put a little shelf in there to sleep on, and bought a bunch of survival stuff and jammed it in there. It's kind of ridiculous, but I can kind of rustic camp in it. So I know I did that. But what's your kind of van setup? I mean, what amenities do you have in there? What do you like, or how has it changed from like when you first got it? Like, did you buy the van and then just like pack the bag at the house, threw your stuff in there, and like, all right, where am I headed?
That is almost exactly what I did. So I was actually renting a room from somebody I think I'd been there about 2 years. And at one point, the homeowner said, hey, I think I'm going to sell this fall. And, this was in late July. And so fall was not really that far off. And I didn't have an exact date. I didn't know how pressured this was. So I'm kind of stressing, trying to figure out where am I going to rent, where can I get a safe area, a safe apartment to live as a solo female. That was a concern, being in the city.
And this was in Kentucky?
Yes, in Louisville. And so I had always been kind of entertaining the idea of living in a vehicle, because I was like a rustic camper, and I just didn't mind, doing things with the more rugged approach. And then I get this little pop-up on Facebook Marketplace of this specific van, and I'm kind of looking at the ad, and no red flags came up. And so the first opportunity that I had, me and my dad went out and scoped this thing out in a grocery store parking lot.
Right.
And all of the, everything checked out. And I knew as soon as I opened those side doors and saw the gray custom interior, which was essentially just, carpet, a bench seat, like everything was in pristine condition.
Can I pull up your Instagram?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. But a lot of people, especially people that are older than me, can remember the vans of this era that they were customized from, whoever originally bought them or even off the lot sometimes. So it already kind of had that van life feel, albeit a vintage one, and it already had 12-volt outlets all the way around that function. So I always had electricity and interior lighting and little swivel reading lights that were just already there. So those two big components I didn't have to touch. And I just folded the bench seat down and I took the middle two capstan chairs and sold them, threw all my stuff in a week after I bought it. And like, this is what we do now.
So yeah, my aunt, I remember I don't remember what her van was. It had to have been a GMC or something. But yeah, big luxury van. We loved it. All the seats reclined down. It was the most fun thing ever. She no longer has a van like that, but I did really love it. So I'm pulling up your Instagram. Question. So like, you're talking 3 years you had that van. Obviously it's getting a new motor put in it right now as we speak. That should be happening. So it lasted this 19 vehicle from 1985 lasted you the last 3 years. Did you come right to St. Louis? Did you kind of stick around Louisville for a while and deal with it? Or did you immediately head this way? And then as you're talking, I'm going to bless everyone with the ability to check out your van on your Instagram page. Do you want your Instagram handle out there?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So whenever I bought it in Charleston, Indiana, which is about 20, 30 minutes north. And I'm from Southern Indiana, and, kind of that whole region is right across the river from Louisville, Kentucky. So, they kind of go hand in hand. They're almost one and the same at this point, even though they're two different states. But I bought the van and I kind of dawdled, just kind of figured things out. The first several weeks were very stressful because I'm making a massive change and I'm trying to figure out where I can park. And I was legitimately just like street parking or finding friends with businesses. I'm like, hey, can I park my van here? Like every once in a while, or like on these certain days of the week, because kind of the core thing I learned with van life, especially in an urban environment like that, is you keep moving.
Right.
You tend to stay under the radar that way, and without like a permanent safe spot to go. That was just kind of the approach that I took. And then
do you think that's stressful, having always moved and being worried about that?
Especially with a vehicle like that is very recognizable, and it is not just a white cargo van like everybody else has for their business. It does stick out. And I really didn't have that many issues, to be entirely honest. I got pretty lucky with that, and I was, very perceptive of what my environment was and whether or not I should really be in a certain area, and that worked really well for me. After that, I moved to the Cincinnati area for a while, dated a guy for a little bit that also had a van, and so we actually went on some trips with, it's just like a little caravan, for an entire, like several times out in a year. Just made shorter trips like that. But then I did come back to Louisville for a while, and then from there I took a trip out to Missouri for a race and just had this pop-up for a job on my phone, decided that I was ready to kind of move to a different area, and that's how I ended up here. I really just...
That was 41 weeks ago. I know that because I just seen the picture of both fans. So yeah, pretty cool looking convoy there. Sick. So yeah, people want to find you on Instagram. They can go to g.brockstar on Instagram, and they can follow along. You post some dope pictures, really beautiful pictures. So yeah, definitely worth giving a follow to and staying up to date on Genna's travels. She'll need us to stay up to date on her because as soon as the van's completed, you're obviously back here in St. Louis. You're in Eureka. Your van's in Louisville. How do you say it?
It's Louisville. You almost have to make it 2 syllables. I say Louisville because a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about when I give it the Kentucky twang.
Okay, so your van's in Louisville.
Yeah.
So
there.
Yeah, you have to get back there, and surprising to none, nobody wants to give you a ride 410 miles just to follow you back to St. Louis. So you decided this was a perfect opportunity to jump on your bike and ride 410 miles. You've got split out over 4 days. why did you think that was feasible or a good idea? Because
Um,
I'm sure a lot of people have told you you should not be doing this. That it's not a good idea. Common thing we hear cyclists all the time. Everyone's always telling us the things we do are ridiculous or silly or we shouldn't or blah blah blah. They have no idea kind of what comes from doing things like that. So, I mean, what was your motivation in doing it other than like you had to, like you want your home back? So,
for one, I know what I'm already capable of, and we're not at the limit of that yet, for certain. Because as I mentioned on the last episode, I am doing the Unbound 200 gravel race, which is a 200-mile unpaved road race in Kansas, and it is nonstop. And I've completed this race before. By far the most difficult thing that I've done on a bike, and I knew that I was just kind of hooked on that ultra endurance stuff after I finished that. And then I, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, rode the Katy Trail to Columbia. 110 miles
okay.
was the one-way effort from Washington, Missouri, and then I came back the next day. So I did 220
And
in
just
2
so
days.
you know, kind of like Louisville here in Missouri, we pronounce it. It's actually we don't merge syllables together. We put an R in, so it's Washington.
Well,
so you headed out from Washington, Missouri.
We can discuss that after the close of this episode.
It's Washington, Missouri.
That's going to be. I don't know about that one. I don't know if I can.
Took party far out there to Washington, Missouri.
We'll work on it.
Okay. So you did that, and that made you think like this was. I mean, was it like the feeling you got from like once you got there? You were like, "Oh, this is so cool that like I started on essentially one side of the state and basically rode a good amount across the state." I mean, what is it that made? What about that trip made you want to do it again?
It is basically I can just drop everything and go under my own power. It's such a simple way to do things, and the bike to me is a tool for experiencing the world that I haven't really found any other way. I know that hikers get it, runners get it. It's just this place of existence from exerting yourself and also going somewhere. And so, I'm going to pick my van up, which is, getting a new engine on it. So that's kind of been its whole ordeal. But even though that is my end goal, is to kind of finish that plan out, those 4 days that I'm riding to Louisville, I probably won't even think about that much because I'm just instead very in the moment, very focused on just covering ground. And for those 4 days, there's life outside of that isn't really happening. And any time that I am doing like these very high mileage rides, that's kind of where it ends up. Whereas before, as more of a short distance, like sprinter type, I was doing crit races, cyclocross, things that go on for less than an hour. You really aren't thinking about normal life, but it's almost like the prep time takes more time than the race itself. Whereas this is the complete opposite of that. Like I'm getting so much more reward for my efforts that way than I was when I was just doing these really intense races with definitely chasing a result.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And you bring up a good point. I think that's, you see a lot in cycling where, a lot of people do it to kind of escape because it is that simplicity of it's like, okay, if I'm on my bike or, if I'm embarking on a long hike or whatever it may be in the woods, like nothing else matters. It's upper surviving this day or accomplishing these goals. I mean, and I wonder if it's almost like if you're working on meditating and things like that. Like in meditation, obviously, like the ideal would be to be like fully still and have your mind completely clear. But really, I mean, maybe there's some people who can actually accomplish that. But for most of us, if we sit down and try to meditate, even once you've been at it for a couple of months or start to, get a little bit better, your mind's never going to be completely clear and thoughts are always going to creep in. And kind of the point in meditation is, allowing that to happen and then just kind of sitting with it and letting it clear itself out. And then there's an effective part with that. So I'd venture to guess with a longer ride like this, or like a lot of us, maybe we go for a mountain bike ride for a couple hours and those thoughts are always in our head. And there's certain moments when you're pushing up a hill or really exerting yourself where they get blocked out because your body's just on surviving to get up that climb. But I would think the same thing, like when you're on the road, like you might have those thoughts, but then they're going to be beat out of you by day 2 and day 3. and definitely by day 4. So I think that's really cool. I mean, on your longer journeys, you find like the further you go, kind of the more kind of clear you get, or do you? I feel like I would just think the whole time. But I've never rode my bike for more than like I've never ridden my bike anywhere near any amount of distance like that.
I would honestly say that the beginning of an effort like this, I'm just excited, energized. Like there's obviously weight that I'm carrying, like mentally and emotionally.
Hmm.
That's not necessarily hitting me in the moment because I'm just kind of overwhelmed by the newness of this challenge that I'm doing.
Hmm.
As I go, I definitely am more honest with myself about the things that I am carrying. But there's something to be said for, at least with me, using movement to process things like that versus sometimes, like if I'm really hurting over something, I'll retreat to my van, which is my safe zone, and I'll just kind of like hit myself with these things. And that helps too, but something about associating dealing with, any baggage that I might have with the power that it takes to propel a bike that far,
Hmm.
they kind of almost fuel each other. I definitely I go through every single range of emotion whenever I'm on a ride like that,
Hmm.
even if it's with other people. That is a distraction, but typically the other person I'm riding with is going through something.
Hmm.
But it almost kind of eliminates that wall that you set up for yourself. Like I don't want to think about these things. I want to just distract myself from it. Biking, like riding a bike, any amount of mileage like that does not allow for a distraction.
Right.
For me, it forces me to put myself through that stuff, and it feels good somehow. I think there's something to be said for that cliche to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That applies physically, emotionally, mentally, all across the board, and you just kind of finish like, I understand who I am as a person now.
Hmm.
And it's been building on that theme for the entire 7 years I've been riding.
So we just ate. Eureka got a new sushi restaurant. Not to disturb you too much, but I can hear my stomach growling. It's like we literally just ate. I don't know why that's happening, but it was right. So maybe I just felt full and I wasn't actually full. I don't know if the mics pick it up or not. So I may have brought this up for no reason, or people may think that we're about to be attacked by monsters here at the shed. So don't worry, guys. We are safe. No, I mean that's a good point. I mean that it's really interesting you bring that up about when you are dealing with stuff, or if you're not in like a really good headspace, when you get out and go for a ride, like having your blood pumping and working through things as your blood's pumping and as you're visually processing all those things. I know Coach Cuddy from the Wheels Up Enduro team, me and him talked. I think we were off camera when we talked about it, unfortunately. But he talked about, and he's a nurse and he's a coach. He's a long time in the bike industry with a lot of big companies over the years, and that was his whole thing, was like there's a certain level that you reach when you're exerting force, and then the visual processing, when those two combine together, just how good that can be for you mentally. So like you said, out on the road, it's getting that heart rate up. It's much better than just sitting in a dark room by yourself. Like if you think something's bothering you or you're anxious about something, you're just sitting in a dark room, I have a feeling it's going to take a lot longer to get past that. It's going to take a while. You're never going to come up with the solution because your brain's sitting there, it's depressed or whatever it may be. So it just feels down. So you're focusing on all the negative. Whereas if you're out doing something active, whether it's going for a walk or going for a hike or going for a 410-mile bike ride, that blood flowing is gonna, it's the same thing like they tell you to chew gum in school or whatever. They always would tell kids to do that. And I'm sure it's the same thing about getting everything moving in there. And as the blood's pumping to your brain and as your circulatory system's just working on high drive, then that's going to allow you to think a little bit clearer. Um, and you get like dopamines and all kinds of
Mm-hmm.
weird releases of chemicals as you exert yourself and your heart rate gets up. So all those things are going to help affect your brain. And I know I've realized that with my brain injury, like it's crazy the amount of control your body has or your brain has over your body and how little things can affect stuff so much. Because I get to deal with like amplified versions of that over the last year, of like little things that wouldn't matter much, or whether it's, things I put in my body or don't put in my body, or when I'm taking my vitamins, when I'm not, when all these different things affect your mental state and what you're able to do. And there's probably no better cure for depression or mental issues that you're dealing with than getting your blood pumping and moving. I don't think if you're on a stationary bike in your house, just spinning wheels and getting your heart rate up, you're not going to accomplish the same thing that if you're outside and the world's going by you and you're pumping your legs and you're making everything move.
Yeah, I was never interested in being an athlete for the sake of being an athlete. That alone was never satisfying for me. Now, as a kid or in high school, I really did want to participate in sports, but I was definitely pretty antisocial, and it's really hard to be involved with team sports with that kind of personality. And then I also, just didn't have the opportunity to play sports with just, my mother was unfortunately disabled. So there was a lot of resources that were kind of going into taking care of her. And, so I just didn't really get the opportunity to participate much or, have friends outside of just those I made in the classroom. But then whenever I was 19, I got a Target bike. It seems like that's how everybody kind of starts is, just picking up any bike that's around and just going and cruising. And that was literally the first thing in my life that I ever picked up and stuck to.
Had you ridden a bike as a kid? Did you have bikes like, 20-inch bike, 24-inch bike, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, but it was never.
But you never went out and explored the neighborhood on it. It was just riding around in the yard, front of the house kind of stuff.
Right. And then once I kind of had my autonomy as an adult is when I kind of started branching out and going riding on the road, even just doing 9 miles. And everybody around me at that time was like, "You're an idiot. Like, what do you?"
It's crazy.
And it was just, I would, there was one time where I just got too hot and I had to have somebody come pick me up, and you could tell that they were just, I was less than 3 miles from my apartment.
Okay.
And you could tell they were annoyed by the fact that they had to come and get me, just like, well, of course this happened to you. And now,
Sure.
that was a 9-mile ride. And now I'm, tackling triple digits and, coming home just fine. Albeit stressed, sometimes with a heat rash, obviously very tired, whiny, but it just is it sends your brain to a different place even when you are hurting that bad. But yeah, I don't really know where I even picked this compulse to do this. It just kind of was the only thing in my life that
cycling
really
or this trip specific cycling.
Yeah. But like the whole root of this trip has just been a build since I started it. Like there's a lot of people now that knew me back then that were like, we knew you were going to do something nuts, or we knew that you were kind of wired funny. And now they're just like, that sounds like a Genna thing to do, is to just.
Were you always like outdoorsy? Did you always like, would you camp outside your own house and stuff like that ever?
Yeah. So I spent a significant amount of my childhood with my grandparents, and they were very much old fashioned. Like they'd let me use the computer or watch TV, but only for a very limited amount of time. Otherwise they'd kick me outside and like, go.
We didn't have computers or TV when I was a kid.
Yeah. So. I remember dial up, like, so that, if my grandma wanted to make a phone call, like, Genna, get off Neopets. Like, but so I would just, go outside, and I would, my grandpa had a cattle farm that was, closer to the end of the time that I was living with them. They sold all the cattle, but they still had all this property. So he would take his bush hog and just cut random trails through the grass.
Sick.
And so I would just go run them, and he would let them grow back up, and then he would go cut more, and he would intentionally leave dead ends and then retrace. So I always kind of had like this place to explore there, and I'd go catch turtles. Like that was my upbringing. I idolized Steve Irwin. His whole demeanor was just like, I want to be that.
His son is starting to do more and more now. His YouTube channel is getting pretty lively. And yeah, I just recently, I had seen him like on a couple talk shows, his son, a couple of years ago, and he was really young, and you could tell he was starting to get into it. I think his daughter even does it as well. But his son, I just recently seen another video with his, and he's full on. Like he looks like a miniature Steve Irwin. It was so refreshing to see. I was like, this is so dope. Like this makes me so happy to see it, because that's what I mean. A lot of us growing up, I think I mean, Steve Irwin, that's one show I think all of us watched all the time, you know.
I would take when my grandpa still had cows, I would take his binoculars and look out the window and in the field, and I would narrate their movements like Steve Irwin. Like that's how kind of off the rails I was about it. And I legitimately cried
when he died.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was upset too. Yeah. Yeah, because he was such a good dude. And I mean, you could tell he was a very genuine person that just really gave a crap about what he did. Yeah, and it's a shame he was really smart with it too. And yeah, it's unfortunate the way he went out. But and you know, I've never really considered, but I wonder if that played into why I ended up becoming an exterminator and um, got so into that and biology courses. I mean, ultimately, the real reason I got into extermination was Billy the Exterminator. I learned everything I knew about extermination, like from like how to run the business side of things, from watching Billy the Exterminator and then VexCon as well. But yeah, TV shows really molded my career path. And then I watched GMBN and the Dirt Shed show, and that's how I ended up with the mountain bike shed. So very easily influenced by television and YouTube videos.
I'm very out of the loop with a lot of that kind of thing, just because, you know, like I said, I wasn't really allowed to consume that much, which fed my just let's go do things.
They have a
outside.
road bike section of GMBN. They call it like, I don't know what they call it, Global Cycling
GCN,
Network.
Yeah,
it's just GCN.
Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep, I've seen both sides of it.
They're pretty funny. The GCN guys are pretty funny. I'll give them that.
I got really
the outfits a little much for me. But, you know,
careful.
You got to do what you got to do.
But I think, you know, Steve Irwin was like, obviously I feel like there's really not that many people alive that don't know who he was in some capacity, but just, you know, those few people that, like you said, he was so good and so passionate about what he did. I paid attention to that when I saw it. And so now.
And the man had no fear.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say that I have no, like idols, but I paid attention to the people that were super intense about very unorthodox things. And I with the van, with the bike, I just latched on to that part instead of, oh, you need to find something to, you know, actually do with your life that's, you know, driven by something else other than just raw passion. And so I'm very happy with that. But
do you feel like you being a cyclist like brings any positive into the world?
It's funny you bring that up, because with my Instagram account, I don't intentionally try to like follow me, see what I'm doing. Appreciate the shout out, but that's not something that I reach for personally, because I do kind of want people to find that organically, or them to just meet me in person and be like, oh, I relate to what you're saying, so let me kind of get more of that. But whenever I do post, you know, I do post a lot of really colorful photos, you know, that are, you know, just from just mere snippets of my life. But I do tend to pair them with some pretty cathartic captions, just to be like, this is how what I'm doing right now impacts how I'm feeling, or hopefully I can kind of serve as some sort of example to somebody else out there that is struggling with something, or they're not happy with what they're putting their energy into in their life. Because I do remember a time, you know, whenever I was young and didn't have so much control, just feeling like there were things that I was wanting to do and couldn't. Like I had dreams and I didn't have the resources to actually follow those. So whereas me riding my bike is entirely a selfish venture, I feel like the things that I'm getting out of it are worth sharing, and that maybe somebody sees that, or my post with the van, or, you know, these big efforts that I'm doing, and they're like, oh, well, if this person with zero background can do something like that, then so can I. Because I definitely didn't have like a platform that I started out on. Like, I'm a first generation, pretty much everything. This wasn't motivated by, my parents did this. Like I just kind of started everything on my own. It's like, it's not just the van or the bike. Like, I'm a fairly multifaceted person. I do artwork commissions. Like, I've drawn people's pets multiple like years in a row for Christmas gifts. People are paying me to draw their pet portraits, and
You're a model now?
Apparently. I wrote poetry in high school. Like I did some journalism stuff. Like I like writing, hence the Instagram posts, having some words involved with them. I've just dabbled in a lot of different stuff, and I'm like, this has got to be useful somewhere. And so I just kind of carry all of that, and I really do feel like that it could be, applied better in some areas. But
yeah, when you came in, it was just a couple of weeks ago when we met you, and when I looked up your Instagram, I was already following you on Instagram. So I hadn't seen it post. I would have remembered seeing your van lately, so I hadn't seen a post in a while. But at some point in the last 4 years, I followed your account, which is weird. And I would venture to guess, just a real quick before you move past, like when you say you're first generation everything, I'm assuming you didn't have any friends that were, I mean, did you have friends even that were like big outdoorsy types of folks or anything like that? So you had zero whatever to do with it. Yeah.
Not really. Whenever I was young, like I was moved from school to school quite a lot. And I know that had something to do with me once I actually got to, a consistent, location in about 6th grade. Like I think I kind of had already shut down socially. And then by that point, kids can be pretty mean. They've already established their social groups.
Mhm.
They're not necessarily the most eager to, pull in the new people. It does happen. Like you tend to find
Kids
a
are slightly
spot.
better at it now.
Yeah.
Because they understand the consequences of not doing that. So
Right.
I think everybody looks out a little bit more. Sometimes I'm not in high school, so I don't realize how mean children are. That's my outsider perspective. It's probably not true.
At that point, like I had just established myself as so much of a loner that I didn't know how to get out of that. And I also I just had such a weird, kind of constantly moving upbringing, which probably has to do with why I live in a van now and I just move all over the place. There's got to be some connection that I just kind of never really integrated anywhere. And I stopped trying really. So yeah, I didn't really have any friends that were influencing what I did. I just almost collapsed and went inward and started looking at myself, even in 6th and 7th grade, when you don't have a concept of that kind of depth really, where I'm just like developing my voice, my talents, what I'm actually interested in, listening to what I felt compelled to do instead of what I was being told to do, to the absolute disdain of my parents, I'm sure. But I just really focused on just being an individual. And so, yeah, like I've had, some influence from people that want to help, like if I'm in a tough spot, like, but most of it's nobody got me into anything that I'm doing. I just somehow developed it.
Yeah, and it's lucky you did. And I think probably most cyclists are a bit of that kind of loner. And I don't want to call cycling an escape because it's for sure not. It's to me, it's hard to explain. I think a lot of people find cycling because they're trying to look for something, or they feel like they're not part of something else and they end up kind of going towards it. I don't know. I'm trying to come with this, like put a bow on this thought all together. But yeah, it is important, and like you said about sharing your story with it, because like as you go into your trip, you've got, you tell people you're going to go on a 400-mile ride. People who don't ride bikes don't understand why you would want to do that. They won't understand what you get out of that, what kind of growth that you're going to be able to take with you for the rest of your life because you've completed a journey like that. And it's important to have people out there like you, or it's very similar reason to why we opened the shop here. I knew when I found mountain biking, or refound biking when I was about 21, 22. Same thing. I just kind of didn't have anything I was passionate about. I was down in the dumps all the time. As soon as I found a bike, I was like, this is amazing. And it opened up a whole world to me. I went from a very small, like, never really leaving St. Louis, not really sure what I was going to do, not sure how I was going to what I was going to do with the rest of my life, or how I was going to make all this work. Had a kid very young. So for me, when I found biking, it just opened up even just St. Louis. Like I grew up in South St. Louis in Dogtown. We didn't we'd come out to South County and see my aunt. I thought we were in the country. You know what I mean? Like, we were very city kind of kids. So like, and a lot of all my friends I grew up with were the same way, and a lot of them still live in the city. And it's this very small world view, and it can be really, it's hard to get out of that until you find something that you can. And in cycling, whether it's on the road or the trails, that ability to kind of explore and get out there, I think really opens up your mind to more possibilities. So for me, it was important to open up the bike shop, because I was like, nobody around here knows what mountain biking is. I know how big of an impact it had kind of opening up my life and having me go from, what am I supposed to do in life and how do I ever make this work? Because I tried being like a union carpenter and I was like, that sucks, like, just it absolutely blew. And yeah, I just didn't have purpose. I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I found bikes and I was like, oh, I can go anywhere and do this. And this is free. And like, it was just amazing. The people I would meet would be cool. And yeah, I wanted, it was really important to me to kind of spread that message around. And I think what you're doing is the same way. Like, people need to see examples of it, because I don't have, well, I take that back. My uncle John is a pretty big cyclist. He likes to ride around, like, but he lives in an RV and travels around the country. So I was never around to see him be a cyclist. He used to take me camping when I was a kid. But yeah, so like, I didn't know anybody up until I opened the shop. I knew one person who rode mountain bikes. That was it. Like, I didn't know anybody who rode mountain bikes. It's just, so us being out there, you putting pictures up like that, you doing all those things does kind of help spread that message a little bit more. So I think we talked about BAM Life. I think we talked about why you did it. I think we've talked about why you want to go on such an epic journey of 410 miles. What have you been doing this week to make sure that you're not going to die? How many miles do you ride on like an average day, kind of in preparation of this ride over the last few weeks?
It's been kind of all over the place, because I did have a pretty epic bike meltdown a couple weeks ago that kind of put a big hole in my training plan. So it's mostly just, I'm doing like 30, 40 miles, like a couple times during the week. And then on the weekends, working a pretty stable, Monday through Friday job. When I have the time on the weekends, I'm just like, all right, how can I pack as much into a weekend without completely, destroying myself?
On average, how many miles do you think you do a day?
A day? Well, it's kind of hard to say.
A week.
Day. Yeah, a week is 150 to 200 when things are going correctly.
Cool.
Obviously bad weather, which, we're just now kind of getting into the season where you can expect consistent warmth. But whenever we're having those high, low, like extremes in the transition seasons, those are not only hard to prepare for, but they also, for me personally, just drain my energy.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
I can't really push the way that I need to. And so I have to be pretty careful there, because I have experienced a pretty severe overtraining incident in the past, from just not listening to when I'm tired and just being like, oh, well, if you're going to be a harsh athlete, you have to really be tough and push through that. I kind of learned the hard way that isn't necessarily the smartest approach.
The tortoise and the hare, an age-old fable.
But it's mostly just making sure that, my bike, I think I'm using a different bike for this, but making sure that is completely, mechanically correct. Like, I had it entirely rebuilt. Making sure that I kind of do the math on what kind of nutrition that I need.
What kind of nutrition are you planning on bringing with you? So you've got day one, how many miles?
That is 96.
96 miles day one. Day two?
113.
113. Day three?
152.
And that's when you have most of your elevation as well?
Yes.
About 6,000 feet of climbing that day?
It'd probably be closer to 7, knowing how the mapping app goes.
That's on day three, after you've already ridden 200 miles previously, which is normally what you try to complete in a week, as far as your normal riding goes. So day three, you were like, screw it, let's do another 100 miles than I'm used to doing, and let's add a ton of elevation. And then on your last day, you're going to, how many miles do you have on your last day?
I think it's right at 50.
50. So nutrition wise, so like, 100 miles in a day, you're probably going to average what, 15-ish miles an hour, maybe a little bit less.
That's the goal pace, yeah. And since I'm heading from west to east, I'm hoping I have a little bit of a tailwind to help out. We'll see. But nutrition wise, it's
Because
mostly
day one's going to be in Illinois, right?
yeah.
You better hope for a tailwind, or you might pedal forward and actually move backwards.
Yeah, I've already thought about that. I'm just trying to keep that because riding the Katy Trail the opposite direction, that's also flat with a lot of exposed areas, and I was fighting the wind for 8 hours straight.
Sure.
That one day, so we've been there.
I would recommend maybe in your pack having some sort of like get like a bungee cord or some sort of long draw cord, so that way you could attach it to your handlebars if you maybe the wind's too much, and then as like 18-wheeler or something goes by, just lasso it under their mirror and then let them kind of pull. Maybe have multiples, because I'm not sure you're gonna be able to get that off, and probably the only way to break free is just let go. And then now they have a new pull rope for the next cyclist that they come across.
Glossing over the fact of how illegal that probably is.
Is it? Is there rules?
I'm a cyclist.
I don't feel like the founding fathers would have put that in the Constitution.
I'm a cyclist, so my hand-arm coordination is probably not great for latching onto a semi-truck. I'm also hoping that I don't encounter any semi-trucks on the ride that I'm on.
You're an equine, or is it no? Is an equine actually the horse?
Oh, equine.
Equine.
Is
that a person who works with horses?
That's referring to the horse.
Okay.
An equestrian would be a horseback rider.
Right.
I'm just the barn hand.
Right. But you work with horses,
yes.
So you should know how to lasso.
Well, we're not that kind of barn.
You're not the 666 ranch?
No.
Okay. That's unfortunate.
But yeah, back to the
sorry.
back to the nutrition thing. For mileage that's that long, I kind of throw the math out the window.
Are you gonna eat the night before?
Oh, for sure. I have to eat anytime I'm off the bike. I better be eating. Yeah.
Okay. So you like ton of pasta and stuff the night before, something like that.
Usually it's cereal.
Okay.
Because pasta can be a little bit heavy.
Okay.
But a lot of cereal, just like
interesting.
Just sweet stuff like that can really does kind of serve as chocolate milk is like, I swear,
dude, I've been training for an epic ride all freaking week then, dude. I'd be on it. I could probably go really far with my diet.
Yeah, off the bike, I know that there's a Cracker Barrel very close to my first hotel, so that's probably where I'll end up.
Okay.
But on the bike, it's just like I carry what I think I can eat that I know is going to give me fuel. So obviously I'm taking your standard like gels and
will you eat breakfast? So you'll eat the night before. Will you eat breakfast the morning before you head out?
I'll do my best. Especially when I'm anticipating something like this, my appetite just kind of shuts down, especially the morning of. There will be a little too much coffee, which is probably to my detriment. But I'll eat what I think I can. But otherwise,
if anybody gives you trouble, just be like, I actually rode through a mud puddle right when I began this ride.
that might be one of the things where I'm calling for help. Like, I'm already my chamois. But yeah, I have to eat. And like, I've been told, like, this is a massive undertaking that I'm doing. And the people that are educated, like, my former coach that I've asked about this, he's like, you can definitely do it, but you can't ride your typical speed. You're going to have to back that down, and you're going to have to just eat like not stop. And that's going to be a test. But
what's your longest ride in a day that you've done?
206.
206. And that was in that race?
Yeah.
Okay. That was one day?
Yes.
How'd you feel the day? How'd you feel when that ride ended? Were you in pain? Could you walk? Did you have a big limp?
All of the above. I remember we stayed in Emporia University, which, was just a college that housed the racers for that race. And after we finished the race, the biggest thing was, I think my body, because it was called the Dirty Canada 200. So my brain wrapped its head around 200. Okay, we're 200. And then my computer showed me we'd gotten to 200. Everything's shut down. I couldn't sit on my saddle anymore all of a sudden because it just hurt so bad to sit. And then I just kind of got, I wouldn't say dizzy, but we were kind of bordering on like, all right, why are we not laying down now?
Right.
But whenever I got back and I finally, got off the bike and could stand, I remember I had a hard time actually standing upright and not being L-shaped. We went into, the dorms, and I showered, and I did lay down on the shower floor at one point just to kind of like feel like I could take a full breath.
Yeah.
And so I got out of the shower, and then I immediately went back to the cooler in our support car. And my teammates were asking like, "Hey, can you grab this for us?" And me being the hero type that I am, like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
Right.
I'll do this for you." I get out to the car, and what I'm going after are Yoo-hoo, the chocolate drink. If I'm feeling really bad, that's what I go for, because it's basically straight sugar.
Got you who's in the fridge here at the shop.
That stuff is jet fuel on a bike. I because it's non-dairy, so if you have,
it's not carbonated. Well, I guess no, it's not
it's
carbonated.
not. No, it's just it's super simple.
So it's not going to bubble up in your stomach.
It's super simple to just keep you upright.
Right.
And so I was going for that, and they had a Yeti cooler, and I undid the little bungee straps for the Yeti cooler, and I tried to lift it, and I couldn't. Like, my upper body was so damaged from just all the vibration of being on gravel roads, and rugged gravel roads at that.
Right.
That I there wasn't a muscle on my body that I felt like I had real control over. And so I couldn't lift the lid to this cooler. And so I just sat on the ground and just started crying over something that little. And then I finally got over it. I opened the cooler, and I'm just gasping for air. And I remember having to walk back down the stairs sideways, kind of leaning on. Yeah. So none of this sounds fun.
Right. Well, that was twice the distance. So you're only going half the distance in a day. So you'll have plenty of time to drink Yoo-hoos when you get back to the hotel. And such.
Paved.
And what? And
paved. Yeah. There's
Have you ridden any of these roads before, or are you going blind?
I'm going blind until that last day. The last day is all home territory, so I'll be super comfortable. So really, I'm just kind of looking at those 3 major days. But I'm only really going to allow myself to think about one day at a time, getting point A to point B. Yeah. And then we do it again the next day. Right. But that first day is the one that I'm the most afraid of, because it's getting out of the city. I have not explored St. Louis or Illinois whatsoever. So I'm riding that blind, and then hoping that I don't hit accidental unpaved roads going through rural Illinois, because I'm not riding gravel tires.
Yep. And Illinois does have a lot of points where they cut you across in places, and it is gravel roads sometimes. Yeah. But they are actually, I don't know about that. They're pretty good, more so than like St. Charles is. About like St. Charles always makes me mad because I have a gigantic truck with tires that stick out 12 inches past my fenders, or I've always had motorcycles. So if I go to joyride around St. Charles and I'm trying to go somewhere, next thing you know, it always wants to turn me down a gravel road. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, there's no like setting to turn that off in Google Maps. You really don't know a lot of times until you get to it. So yeah, that'll be interesting if you need to do that. Was there anything that, when you kind of decided that this was going to be something that you were going to embark on, was there anything that came up that was almost like, okay, this is a concern and I'm not going to do it? Or was there anything, not even that I'm not going to do it, but was there anything that came up for you that really worried you and kind of had you second guessing as to whether you wanted to head out on this journey or not?
Well, it's worth mentioning that the original plan was to do 2 200-mile days instead of 4. But that changed because, one, I actually forgot that I had already scheduled the week after completely off of work. So there was a timeline pressure to get it done in a weekend. And that would have included like picking the van up after riding 200 miles and driving back to St. Louis.
Which is probably more dangerous than actually riding.
Right. And what changed that plan also is I actually had a friend that I used to train with quite a lot in Louisville, has the same attitude as me. I'm not quite sure how, what his age is, but, significantly older than me, and just like this diesel engine of a bike rider, very steady, very experienced, very stable person to ride with. But he was originally going to shuttle out to St. Louis and do this with me. And we had planned to, kind of, if we needed like a rest day in between those two efforts, we were going to do that. I had that much wiggle room at least. And then he got COVID. And so he's like, I'm pretty sure that I'll recover from this, but I don't think that I should immediately jump back into an effort like that. And so I'm like, okay, we're doing this on our own, which means that I should probably take some extra safety precautions which included not riding in the dark more than maybe like an hour or so.
Okay.
Which will come in the morning as opposed to, 200-mile days, depending on how much you have to stop, if there's inclement weather, if you're riding slowly because you're feeling like garbage.
Right.
Like there was the potential for me to be riding in the dark a lot. And I'm like, I don't want to do that when it's just me.
No. So ideally, if you were to kind of go at a good clip, and we've got about 10 minutes left. If you were to go at a good clip, you would end at what, like 3 or 4 o'clock each day? Like you're starting when the sun comes up or a little bit before the sun comes up and then riding until 2, 3 o'clock or something.
Yeah. I mean, it always ends up being close to like 5, just
Right.
because, taking rest breaks. And again, if I'm not pushing pace, if I'm
Right.
intentionally slowing things down more so than I would on a regular ride, I have to allow myself to just don't pressure yourself to get there at a certain time.
Mhm.
Just be, smart about it. But I do kind of want to finish early enough in the day to where I have time to just kind of really get quality rest in the hotel room instead of finishing, washing up, eating, immediately going to bed, and then getting up at the crack of dawn the next day. Like I need that unwind.
Mhm.
Okay, let me process what I just did, reset for the next day, and then treat it like, okay, we're just starting over.
This is
So
day one.
Yep.
Or no different than when you're riding at home. You're going to ride, one day. And if the next day is nice, you're riding that day. If the next day is nice, you're riding that day. And then maybe you have to take a couple days off if the weather's bad. But yeah, it's no different than what you do here.
Nope.
I have faith in you,
Closer
Genna.
together.
No, that's really awesome. And we'll definitely have you back on maybe a week or two after you get back and kind of settle back in, and we can tell everybody about your journey. Hopefully you don't have too many crazy stories for us about any ridiculousness along the way. And then you'll have your brand new van. Well, not your brand new van, but your van will have new life given back to it. So that'll be exciting for you as well. So then maybe I'll get you to post some more interior. Well, you probably don't like posting interior pictures.
Oh no, I love it because the interior of my van does not match the outside at all, which is just hilarious. When I open it, I'm like, oh, it's like
it's all lined with gold, plated with gold on the inside.
Sure.
There's a spot in there.
Just yellow aluminum foil.
Yeah, I've been to her van. She's got massage therapists in there and everything. It's so dumb. Nutritionists in there.
No, like that I don't think we covered that earlier, but like the inside of my van is literally just where I sleep, a vintage storage cabinet that's screwed to the floor, and just my bikes. That's essentially it. And a camp toilet, but that's neither here nor there. But it is like a little tiny like bedroom in there. And I've been staying in a normal house basically for this week at work because I don't have it here, and I'm just like, this I want that back. I want my no climate control stuffy little toaster.
Yeah, dude, I'm in the same boat. Like I like as small up space as possible. Mine's because I'm super forgetful. So the bigger the space, the more of my day I spend just walking back and forth and back and forth. So it's insane to me. I save time by having small spaces, everything in one place. And then I tend not to lose things. I have to walk back and forth all the time.
Van life's perfect because you can't walk.
My problem is because I would constantly be concerned that I drop something on the ground a state away. And I would always be worried that I'm losing things and I'd be backtracking and driving back. So I don't know if it's good for my home to be mobile, but we'll see one day. Maybe I'll just park over a white tarp and before I leave, just look at the white tarp and make sure everything's picked up.
I did leave my favorite pair of gloves on. I'm pretty sure I left it on the saddle of my bike on the bike rack before I drove off from a ride one day. And yeah, I never found those again. I have lost some kind of expensive stuff, either in the process of moving into that van, which I doubt, or it just disappearing somehow later. So like even in it's small of my space, I still am just easily distracted enough that I do lose a lot of stuff.
Welcome to being a human. I did find some cooler interior pictures of your van that I zoomed in on the screen share. So yeah, dude, we are at 54 minutes and 19 seconds. I think that is sufficient for today's podcast. And then also, I've been trying to bother you about starting your own podcast. You mentioned that that's something you had thought about doing for a while. So probably the next podcast we'll do, it'll be twofold. It'll be both. First, we'll discuss how your journey went for maybe the first, depending on how uneventful or eventful your journey was. Maybe we'll only talk about that for like 15, 30 minutes. And then I think it'd be cool. We do have a lot of younger folks that watch us. And obviously now the thing's going to be doing podcasts, doing YouTube channels, things along those lines. So maybe we'll get into a little bit about how to easily get those kind of things started and all that kind of stuff. So there's something to look forward to. We're still working on the customer co-op room here at the shop. It's where it's now just turning into the recording studio. But it is a place, if anybody wants to come in, we've got it set up good enough. So if you're still watching or listening to me, if you want to work on your bike or if you have some maintenance you need to do, we're going to offer free stand time for right now, just kind of as we get everything sorted, probably for the next, I don't know, maybe a month, a little bit more than that. So give us a call, shoot us a message, hit us up on Instagram if you want some stand time. We'll make sure that that's available for you. The mechanics here Wednesday through Saturday. So if it's going to be something a little bit more intense, maybe schedule for a day like that, preferably not Saturday. Elsewise, I'll be here. I can answer questions. I'm a certified mechanic. I'm not as experienced, as far as that goes. I've only been a mechanic. I guess I've been a mechanic for almost 5 years now, but so I guess I am kind of experienced. That's a sad state of affairs. Oh, but anyhow, so I'm here to help you. I do, my brain does function again now. I do have pretty good executive planning, so I feel like I can walk people through steps without bearing them down too much. And also, I go online, order stuff from us. We got plenty of slashes and other stuff there. So, Genna, anything you want to say to everybody before you head out on your journey? Since it'll be a few weeks since you get to see everybody again.
all I really have to note is just especially with my Instagram and just like my whole theme of just doing stuff that's kind of fathomable to people, is just like, just go do cool shit.
Yeah, get outside and do crap.
Just do, like, if you feel like impulse to try something or do something, just like, you can't wait for the opportunity to be perfect, because nothing that I'm doing that I am so glad that I'm doing came because I spent a lot of time just getting all the details right. Like, you just kind of have to take some crazy dives sometimes, and that's really what I want to, like, even my siblings back at home, like, I really just kind of want to be that example of starting from kind of nowhere and doing something if you have just a glimmer of opportunity to do it. So that is my goal.
That is awesome. And yeah, definitely something people need to keep in mind is if you feel like you want or need to do something, don't let you talk yourself out of it. Freaking do it. Life's short. If you think it's a good idea to do, it probably is. And I mean, how many people told you that this may not be a great idea, this 410-mile ride? No matter how it goes, whether you breeze right through and you're like, it was way too freaking easy, or if you have catastrophic issues and the ride ends early and somebody's got to pick you up, take the rest of the way, you're still going to learn a ton of lessons from that. It's still going to be an epic adventure either way. So, if you're scared, go take your epic adventure, follow Genna's example and do something. Goodbye.